good evening, and welcome to Heads, Honey, Locusts, and Leeks, the fascinating foods of Rosh Hashanah and Jewish history. My name is Avi Snyder. I'm managing editor here at Tikva and producer of the Bible 365 and Jerusalem 365 podcasts. And it is my pleasure to welcome you and to welcome Rabbi Soloveichik.
It's great to be here with you, Avi. I'm super excited about this.
This is going to be very exciting. This is the second event that we're hosting under the auspices of MeirSoloveichik.com. That is a new initiative. That's a partnership between Tikva and Rabbi Soloveichik. That is a wonderful resource for all of us who love to learn from Rabbi Soloveichik. It's your one-stop online shop for all of Rabbi Soloveitchik's work, his daily podcasts, his thoughts on the weekly Torah portion, a growing library of online video courses, essays, articles, and much more. If you are already a MeirSoloveichik.com subscriber, thank you very much for joining our community. We are very much looking forward to having you stay on after the conversation for a special subscriber-only question and answer session. And if you are not yet a subscriber to MeirSoloveichik.com, we hope that as soon as this event is over, you go to MeirSoloveichik.com, MEIRSOLOVEICHIK.com, and you look at what we have to offer, and you subscribe. I spelled that right?
Yeah, no T in Soloveichik.
No T in Soloveichik. All right, the proper spelling. So a popular Shabbat zemer, a popular Shabbat song that is often sung around the Shabbat table, the Shabbat meal, contains the following verse. This is the second verse. In advance, all kinds of tasty food have been prepared. Fattened chickens made ready while it was still day, varied dishes set out, and fragrant wines to drink, and special delicacies all 3 times. And then there is the chorus, the refrain. Lehitaneg beta'anugim barburim uslav v'dagim. Lehitaneg beta'anugim barburim uslav v'dagim. To savor the delights of fowl, quail, and fish. To savor the delights of fowl, quail, and fish. Because it is not enough that we Jews sanctify the Shabbat day over wine and bread, that we celebrate it with a delicious meal. We actually have to sing about the food as we're eating the food. We love food so much. And what is true of Shabbat is even more true of the Jewish holidays. The old line is, if you want to know what any Jewish holiday is about, the summary is, they tried to kill us, we won, so let's eat. And the holiday that we are about to begin, Rosh Hashanah, which starts in less than a week, special foods are really at the heart of this holiday, from the apples and honey that we all know and love, to some of the more exotic foods that are a little less common that you might see before us and that we're going to get to try this evening. So to open tonight, my first question for you, Rabbi, is why do Jews love food so much?
So we have to actually understand why food is so theologically central to Judaism. Obviously, we like to eat, and there's nothing wrong with that. But food at the heart of faith bespeaks a larger religious perspective. There's a very famous description by the writer Marcel Proust about what he calls, he's attempting to describe here, what he calls involuntary memory. And the example that he gives, this is very well known, is how once he bit into a Madeleine, a cookie, and suddenly, in that one bite, his whole childhood flashed before him. It was that one sense of this soft delicacy suddenly transported him in a feeling that was obviously physical, because he's eating, but it's also spiritual. Now, of course, Proust stole this from the plot of the Pixar movie Ratatouille, because that's obviously where he got it from, I'm assuming. How else would Pixar have had the same plot? Surely it can't be that they lifted it out of Proust, so he must have gotten it straight from Ratatouille. But the truth is, there's actually a parallel to that, which is much more powerful and much more poignant. And I actually came upon it just recently when I was rereading the memoir of Rabbi Meir Soloveichik, the former chief rabbi of the state of Israel and the youngest survivor of Buchenwald. And in his own memoir, he describes, this is before he was taken to the camp, how his mother was hiding members of his family from the Nazis. And they're hiding in an attic. And he was a very young boy. And so they were worried that he would cry and give their location away. And so it's very difficult to actually read about it. His mother would, as it were, try to turn it into a special occasion, this hiding in terror, for this young boy who didn't really understand. And so whenever they were getting ready to hide, she would actually make honey cookies for him to feed him while they're hiding. As he writes, before leaving our house, my mother had accurately foreseen what we might face and baked my favorite honey cookies. She knew that when I ate them, they would distract me. More important, they would fill up my mouth so I would be unable to make a sound. That's, of course, a physical description of what food is. And then he writes that his mother needn't have worried because he was very quiet, he was a good boy. But then he adds the following, and he's looking back now. Of course, his parents are ultimately murdered. Only he and one of his brothers survive. And he writes, even today, many long years after those days of horror, I remember precisely the wonderful taste of Mother's honey cookies. The memory of them is my consolation in trying situations. They are the drop of honey with which I sweeten bitter days. And so, if we would unpack that for a moment, what we realize is that Judaism understands, because it has so many mitzvot, so many commandments that relate to the physical, Judaism understands that we are ensouled physical beings, and that our bodies are as much a part of our identity as our souls. Some versions of the religious description of the human being assert that actually it's only our soul that matters. That's not, I think, the traditional Jewish perspective. We begin the day with a prayer, Elokai neshama shenatata bi tohorahi. God, the soul you placed in me is pure. Who's the in me? The me is the body. And both body and soul together make up the human being. And, of course, eating can be a purely physical exercise in hedonism. But if elevated and transformed, and this is what Rabbi Lau is capturing, it can be an experience that is simultaneously physical, but also spiritual. One that unites both taste and love, both pleasure and faith. And thereby, body and soul are joined. And experiences like that can form our memories and our religious identities in powerful and elemental ways. And that ultimately is why food is so important to Judaism itself.
So that touches a little bit on why foods are so central to holiday celebrations.
Yeah.
But of course, in the day-to-day life of any Jew, the way most Jews experience sort of the combination of ritual and food is in the kosher laws, the laws of kashrut. And you wrote a fascinating article, Locusts, Giraffes, and the Meaning of Kashrut, available on MeirSoloveichik.com. You can go there and read it. We're always selling here. And in that article, you seek to explain the reason for the mitzvah, for the commandment of kashrut, of the kosher laws. And you go through a wide array of the explanations given from the medieval period to the modern period for these laws. But you end up finding most of them wanting because they failed to capture something about the totality of animals that are permitted or that are forbidden. So what are some of the explanations that have traditionally been given for kosher, and what's wrong with them?
Yeah, so in part our event was inspired by a conversation that I had, I think for the Tikva podcast, with John Silver, editor of Mosaic. And we spoke there about my article and about how, as I argued in the article, the key to showing that so many of the common explanations for kashrut are wrong, the key is locusts. And I said, it would be great if we began our conversation about food by talking about that, and then maybe ultimately concluding the conversation by eating locusts live on air. I want to emphasize the locusts are not live. We will be eating them live on air. The locusts are no longer alive.
Yes, yes.
But we do have the locusts here. But
you can take a look. We should show
them
folks
the locusts, what we have here.
We have them in a
here we have
beautiful
dried locusts. Yum.
Yes,
no, I don't remember that
delicious.
from the Zemer, the song, the Sabbath song.
That's
For some
true.
reason, Jews did not
true.
look. Foul fish. Where are the locusts? Where are the locusts? But nevertheless, we have the locusts today. And locusts, of course, are kosher. There are specific types of locusts that are kosher, and they're listed in Leviticus. and the Talmud elucidates certain simanim, certain ways to tell which locusts are kosher locusts. We have locusts thanks to natural, I think we can call him a great teacher of the naturalism of the Torah, Rabbi Natan Slifkin, from his incredible museum that he's built in Beit Shemesh. And there are certain types of locusts that are kosher, and the tradition for how you tell which locusts are kosher has been faithfully preserved by Yemenite Jews, so we have them today. So let's give a little background about why locusts are the key. So there's a lot of different explanations for why the Bible prohibits eating certain animals and permits certain ones, and why it gives specific simanim, signs to tell between kosher animals and non-kosher animals, kosher fish and non-kosher fish. And then, in the case of birds, list the non-kosher birds, and from there we deduce what the kosher birds are. The problem
and also in the case of insects, correct?
Insects, it just says don't eat insects, and then it says, but you can eat these types of locusts. So there's a blanket. Don't eat insects, don't eat swarming insects, don't eat creeping insects, just eat locusts. And that's what it says. And I know you were relieved when you first read the text. You're
Of course.
No insects? And then God said, but locusts are fine. And you said, that's a relief. But each area of the natural world has its own signs. For animals, it's only eat animals that chew their cud, that are ruminants and have split hooves. For fish, it's fins and scales, and so on and so forth. And the Torah beyond that gives no explanation. It just says these are the signs. The most common medieval explanation, of course, was health, that there is a medical component to this. And the interesting thing is that the two great sages of Sepharad, of Spain, who are often opponents in explaining the Torah, with one taking a much more philosophical, rationalist bent, and one a more mystical bent, Maimonides and Nachmanides, Rambam and Ramban, even though they usually so often diverge, here they were actually both doctors, and they both give medical explanations. And the problem is, it doesn't work at all. So Rambam says this is all based on health, and the animals that are permitted are healthy, the animals that are not permitted are unhealthy. And he says, and pig also is unhealthy because it's dirty. And he says some not nice things about people in Europe. He's writing in Egypt, in a place where people don't eat pigs, so it's easy for him to get away with that. And he says not nice things about people over in Europe who are eating pigs, and pigs are so dirty, and so on and so forth. And Nachmanides says that the non-kosher fish, those without scales, are bottom dwellers, and they're therefore unhealthy. Of course, none of this is true. None of this works. There are a variety of problems with this theory, with this explanation. Two of my favorite responses, one from Abarbanel, the great Sephardic sage Abarbanel, and one just that I'll mention as an aside, are the following. Abarbanel responds to Maimonides and says something really incontrovertibly obvious. He says, if kosher is all about health, why are we not physically more impressive specimens than non-Jews?
Are you telling me
Right?
Jews aren't known for their physical prowess and athletic ability?
I mean, you don't have to apply to all Jews, the way Jackie Mason says, when he says, a Jew gets out of a limousine, I'm tired, okay? So you don't have to say that, but the fact is, he says in response to Maimonides, he says, I don't understand, so look around. There are a lot more impressive physical specimens than members of the Jewish community, okay? Obviously, because actually other communities had greater access to nutrition probably than the persecuted Jews. But if kashrut is the secret to health, so we should be the healthiest. And then when you look at Ramban, he's writing in Mediterranean Spain, and then he goes to, meaning in Spain, he's not living on the Mediterranean, but he's in Spain, in a Mediterranean country. And then he goes from there to the land of Israel, and he says, we don't eat bottom feeders. We don't eat, bottom feeders, of course. I think the carp is a bottom feeder. Now, shocking as it may be, Ramban never ate gefilte fish. But,
he was missing out.
It's a type of, he for sure was missing out. But that said, it's kind of central to Ashkenazic Jewish cuisine. Right. So it just doesn't match up. It doesn't work. So that's one explanation. And then as you move into modernity, you'll have courageous, eloquent defenders of tradition who will give explanations that will sound like they're philosophically, that they've been developed in a way that I'm not saying this was the motivation, but they're developed in a way that would be philosophically attractive to an enlightened but traditional Jew of the West. So, for example, the great defender of Jewish orthodoxy, Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch, who's rabbi in Frankfurt, has a whole theory which one would think is sort of built to be in consonance with Kantianism. Like he actually says, animals that are ruminants, that stand there and chew their cud, it's like they're actually ruminating, like they actually embody, thoughtfulness. Whereas animals that are more wild, those embody vices that we do not wish to imbibe, as it were. So symbolically, in choosing what is kosher and what is not, we're highlighting which virtues we admire.
So cows and sheep,
right,
as they are chewing their cuds, they are like people who have the leisure to think.
The problem, of course, is that there are plenty of non-domesticated kosher animals, what are known in halakha as chayot instead of behemot, deer, for example, moose, to cite an Alaskan delicacy.
Moose is kosher?
Absolutely. Side note, anything with horns or antlers today are kosher, not because that's one of the signs in the Torah, it just happens to be. There is not a single animal with horns. Rhinoceros doesn't count. There's not a single animal with horns that is not kosher. And there's not a single animal with antlers that's not kosher. But those are chayot, and they actually have different laws about how you prepare to eat them and so forth. But that said, they may chew their cud, but they're not the embodiment of rumination, if you will, quiet studiousness. No one says that when they think of deer. So that also fails. And the key, I argued in this article, lies, of course, in, can I take one of these?
Yeah, please.
The key, of course, lies in our friend over here, Mr. Locust. Because what's interesting about this is, the Torah seems to be pretty down on eating bugs, at least in the theory of at least in its system of kashrut, because it doesn't say here, unlike fish, where it says here's a lot of fish you can eat, here are the fish you can't eat, here's a lot of animals you can eat, here's the birds, etc. It just says don't eat insects, but it says but there is a kosher type of insect. So why it seems as if it's important that there be a kosher type of insect. So the argument I make, and I'm drawing on others who have made this argument before, though they were not as inspired by locusts as I was, is that actually kashrut has one larger purpose, which is reminding us about separation. To be a Jew is to be a part of the world and also separate from the world, a part of humanity and apart from humanity. And our own separating among the animals as we eat is just a reminder of this. And that would explain why, as I argued in the article, it's important that locusts be kosher, because it's important that we perform separation in every realm of the animal world. So there needs to be at least one kosher species in the insect world, so that when we look out at the living world, we can perform separation in every single facet of this world. Fish, animal, bird, insect. At the same time, I argue, even that it's obvious, even though the Torah actually makes it pretty clear why it's important, what is the larger purpose of kashrut, the ultimate explanation for why within each facet of the natural world we follow certain signs, only ruminants, fins and scales, the Torah leaves that deliberately mysterious, known only to God. And the point of that is that kashrut is reminding us of chosenness, of the separation of the Jewish people. But the Torah doesn't want that to lead to arrogance. And so it reminds us, kashrut, that we are the chosen of God, but we are not God. And we are still lowly creatures in his presence. And we cannot hope to fully understand his ways. So kashrut is a mix of the fully explainable and the totally mysterious. We separate kosher animals from non-kosher animals, kosher insects from non-kosher insects. But why the locust? Why the cow and not the pig? That ultimately is mysterious and is meant for us to be a source of humility, therefore, and responsibility.
So it's not just that the explanations for why some animals are kosher and why other specific animals are not kosher, it's not just that those explanations fail, but that actually at the heart of kashrut is the fact that there is no particularly good reason why it's these animals.
I assume
there
is a good reason why God chose it,
that we don't.
But we're not meant to know it.
Right.
We're not meant to know it because if we knew and understood everything about the mitzvot that remind us of chosenness, then that can lead to arrogance, and it's not supposed to lead to arrogance. It's meant to lead to humility and awe and duty and responsibility.
Right. So, transitioning a little bit to some of the other foods in front of us other than the locusts. While kashrut is how we ritualize food on a day-to-day basis, on holidays and especially on Rosh Hashanah, there are a lot of other ritual foods that are eaten as part of the holiday meal. So how did this become a custom? There's certainly nothing in the Hebrew Bible about you have to eat specific foods. It's not like matzah that you have to eat on Passover. How did it become a practice that on the Jewish New Year, we eat all of these specific foods?
So this is really fun and fascinating because the tradition of eating special foods on Rosh Hashanah begins in the Talmud, and the foods as presented in the Talmud are preserved among Sephardic and Middle Eastern Judaism. They're largely lost in Ashkenazic Judaism, who then replace it with other foods. It's lost not because of a disregarding of the Talmud, but because of just a lack of availability of really any food, basically. I'm just kidding, but of a lot of food.
It wasn't easy life in Poland.
Any actual green food, any food that's not a potato. So it's replaced with other foods, and we'll discuss the logic. And then now you see, as the Jewish community has come together in the land of Israel, that many Ashkenazic Jews are readopting some of the original traditions while combining it with the traditions that have developed. And Sephardic Middle Eastern Jews have themselves adopted certain traditions that began in the Ashkenazi world, especially honey. So let's begin to trace this. The Talmud lists certain foods that are meant to be eaten on Rosh Hashanah as a siman. A siman means essentially a sign for the good year ahead. Why is this a sign for the good year ahead? We'll talk about that in a minute. But at the heart of it, what we have to understand is that essentially every single one of them is a pun. Every single one is a pun. So, and they are puns that are Hebrew Aramaic puns, everyone's favorite kind of pun, obviously. So the Gemara says that one is supposed to eat rubia. Rubia is fenugreek.
Okay.
Do
we have fenugreek
We have
here,
fenugreek.
right?
It's hard to get. I think you found fenugreek seed.
Okay.
I don't think you want to eat that live. I think they're like tablets.
Okay.
But they're meant to. This is apparently some sort of herbal supplement or something.
And I guess
like
fenugreek is back in.
Yeah, it's back. In our home, my wife brilliantly was able to find and make fenugreek tea, actually, as part of this. But fenugreek is one. Dates is mentioned in the Talmud. Leeks are mentioned in the Talmud. Gourds are mentioned in the Talmud. These are all Hebrew Aramaic puns. So let's start with fenugreek. Fenugreek in Aramaic is rubia. In Hebrew, to be marbeh or rov means to increase. And so to eat the rubia is to ask sheyirbu zechuyotenu, that our merits should increase. Yirbu is like rubia, increase. So you're basically eating a food and punning in prayer.
And do we do that at the meal? Do you actually recite?
Exactly. So this is part of what's become, as it were, the Seder of Rosh Hashanah. You would eat, if you're eating fenugreek, you would say, Yehi ratzon milfanecha, may it be your will, God, our God and the God of our fathers, sheyirbu zechuyotenu, that our merits increase. Okay? A date is tamar, right, in Hebrew, and it's a pun for yitamu, like to cut off, to end. Sheyitamu oyevenu, our enemies should be ended. Okay, so it's a prayer for the defeat of those who seek the destruction of the Jewish people. Same thing with leeks, which is karti, and karet means cut off, and it's a prayer that the enemies of the Jewish people should be cut off, meaning we're asking for God to defeat those who are seeking the destruction of the Jewish people. And gourd is a fabulous double pun, or triple, because in Aramaic, a gourd we mean like nowadays a pumpkin or a squash. Okay, so it's kara in Aramaic, and you could pun. What ultimately developed was a double pun of yikaru lefanecha zechuyotenu. Kara in Hebrew with an aleph is to read, so we ask God that our merits should be read before Him, right? And then also, kara with an ayin can mean tear up. So we ask God to also tear up any bad decrees against us. So it's a double pun, or triple if you include the Aramaic. So it's all puns. Now here's what's cool, as if that's not cool enough. Okay, so the way we do it in our home, the way many Sephardic Jews do it, is they eat many of these foods. Syrian Jews, as far as I can tell, originally couldn't get a hold of fenugreek, like most people couldn't, and so rubia was replaced with lubia, which is black-eyed peas, and it became a totally different pun of telabavenu, meaning lave, like to turn our hearts toward you. So, but you eat each one, and before you eat it, you say a prayer. But the prayer is a pun. Now, here's what's awesome. So, if you look at traditional Ashkenazi fare on Rosh Hashanah, so one of them is carrots. Now, watch what happens here, Avi. And I can see you're
at the edge of my
suspense. This will involve a Yiddish pun and then a Hebrew pun. So you'll see the evolution, but the pun is consistent. So Jews were looking for a different way to pun on a food to ask for increase. They didn't have rubia, so they couldn't do the Aramaic rubia to Hebrew rov, yirbu. So they ate carrots because carrots in German is mer, but mer also means more. So it's the same pun that should increase. So they would eat it, and then they would ask that either our merits should increase or the Jewish people should increase. What happens next? Then people go from Yiddish-speaking areas to the land of Israel, Ashkenazic Jews. They don't speak Yiddish anymore. So they don't get that pun. What's Hebrew for carrot?
Gezer.
Gezer. But gezer is the perfect pun for gezerot, decrees. So they can then use it to say a prayer for gezerot tovot, for good decrees, or to ask God to undo the bad decrees. The point is more to pun on produce.
Right.
Is basically. In our home, we do all the simanim, but we go in chronological order. We do the Talmudic ones first, and then we do the medieval ones, like honey. And then we do some of the more modern ones, we do some of the more modern ones, and we end by eating half a raisin on top of a piece of celery, and we ask God that we should have a raisin celery. Okay? That one works, I'm telling you, okay?
The thing is, it sounds so goofy, but it's a great example of exactly what you're talking about.
Totally.
It's rooted in the Talmud, but as languages change, Jews invent new
people, right, like
new
I've
puns.
seen it suggested, right, and I only fully understood this when I think it was one of the Yiddish books about food, or maybe it was one of Michael Wex's books, I think it was Michael Wex's book, referred to the development of Marin. And actually, the only one that's not really a pun is honey, and maybe pomegranates, and we'll talk about that. Those are medieval. But the puns remain consistent. It's just the foods that change. I've seen it suggested that somewhere that French Jews should eat a banana because bonne année means a good year in French. Okay?
It's a good one.
So I know that's good for all you French speakers out there. You can have that one. Soloveichiks do not eat bananas on Rosh Hashanah. So, I mean, not that we have anything against it, just we don't go out of our way to eat it. And personally, I'm not a huge banana person. That said, the point is the pun, and the question is why? The question is why. So the suggestion I would offer is the following. One of the central commemorations of Rosh Hashanah is creation. Hayom Harat Olam, we say. Today is the creation of the world. And what we are really marking is the creation of mankind and of the creation of man in the image of God. That man is singular on earth, gifted with extraordinary capacity, but also, of course, with the potential for sin. Now, what marks man as singular? We're told in Genesis that when God creates man, Vayhi Adam lenefesh chaya, that after he breathes breath into the lifeless body of man, man became a living being. One of the earliest translations of that in rabbinic tradition, the Aramaic translation of Onkelos, translates living being not as just living being, but ruach memalala, which means literally a speaking spirit. Meaning what marks man's uniqueness is the power of speech. But of course, what happens on the first day of man's life? How do man and woman who are gifted with this power of speech, what do they do with it? Think about it. First, as we mentioned in Bible 365, and I cited Leon Cass's book on Genesis about this, first thing Adam does when he sees woman is he does not give her a personal name, Chava, Eve, yet. What does he say? He doesn't even actually speak to her. He makes a pun. He says, she comes from me. She was created from me. So she will be called Isha, which means woman because she came from Ish, from man. So it's a possessive pun. Note what he doesn't do. He doesn't say, Madam, I'm Adam. He doesn't talk to her at all. And that's the first use of speech. What's the next use of speech? Who speaks after that?
The snake, right?
Snake. And what does he say to woman? He uses speech to say, really, you should rebel against this law. And so speech is fundamentally misused on the first day. And so in a certain sense, which of course might be linked, interestingly, to the fact that we mark Rosh Hashanah with the shofar, which is a wordless cry. So one of the ways of pondering the power of speech, I think, is puns. Because what makes puns separate from all other humor is the linguistic aspect to it. Other jokes can be translated, puns can't be translated. And some people hate puns, I love puns, but we know that some of the greatest geniuses in the history of the English language use puns. There's a great article in the New York Times that gave the history of pun hatred, that actually reported that Caligula tortured somebody for making a bad pun, which is obviously a terrible form of punishment, but still. But the fact is, puns are linguistic. And that article pointed out that Shakespeare used puns, and Shakespeare was the second most brilliant writer of puns in the history of the English language, of course, the greatest being the people who do headlines for the New York Post. So there's actually real brilliance to puns. And so what we're doing actually is pondering the power of language. And as we mark a day, the creation of man, in which language was a gift but misused, we begin the year by using the power of language, the elasticity of language, in prayer, directing it toward our hopes for the year ahead.
So it's a kind of tikkun, a kind of repair for the
that
original
would be my
sins
suggestion.
of language.
That would be my suggestion. So that's how many of the original foods, which are still eaten today, developed. And there's all sorts of different puns. But what does happen in Ashkenaz is that in the medieval period, Ashkenazi Jews don't have a lot of these foods, and so they look for other omens. But maybe before we talk about that, we should talk about one last pun, which we've been
staring at us all evening.
Staring at us.
Yes.
Which is mentioned in the which is mentioned in rabbinic literature, and that of course is the head of a sheep.
I'm familiar with the head of a fish.
Yeah.
That's very
so
common.
again,
This I've never seen before.
Again, the head of a fish, like other Ashkenazi Rosh Hashanah foods, is a result of privation. It's just that meat is expensive. And for every home to have a lamb's head, I mean, that would require access to meat, which could not, which was just unthinkable.
Right.
So, but what's interesting is actually, this is also based on a pun, and that's linked to what the Tochacha, in which one of the blessings and curses given to Israel, that if they obey the commandments, they'll be blessed, and if they don't, they'll be cursed, is that whether you will be l'rosh v'lo l'zanav, whether God will make you a head and not a tail, which is just a biblical description of whether you will be, as a people, independent or downtrodden. Okay, so this was eaten, you would eat the head of a sheep, and you would use the word rosh. Rosh means head, and you would say, be your will, O God, shenia l'rosh v'lo l'zanav, that we be a head and not a tail.
And is this a Soloveichik family
Indeed.
staple?
This was made by my wife. This is what we eat. And my wife very wonderfully went out of her way to prepare one for our...
I have to say, that.
Yeah, maybe we can, and it actually, you can hold it up, and you could actually, if you see the profile, it
really looks like exactly what it is.
Teeth, and you can make it say, Shana Tova, everybody, like that.
Do you do that at your table?
I'd rather not say, but you could. So along with the evolution that occurred due to privation, nowadays, unfortunately, there's also been a privation in adventurous eating. So that you have some people who don't want to eat anything with a face. And so people started eating the head of fish because they just didn't have access to sheep's head. And then nowadays, I know people who literally eat the heads of gummy fish.
I've heard the head of a cabbage also.
Yeah, well, okay.
Or a head of cabbage.
Yeah, exactly. But this is the original article, and it's delicious.
Okay, you have to cut it. I don't know how to cut
it's very difficult to eat.
A sheep's head.
And really, you don't want to, you can really just, when no one's looking, just take it and eat it with your hands. You just got to be careful not to cut yourself with the teeth, but this is the best meat on the other side.
I was wondering where the
There's a tongue in here too, by the way. But this, I'm going to give you a piece.
Okay.
Have you try it.
This smells really good.
Because this is really
you should know.
Amazing. And here you go.
Okay, this looks delicious.
And I'll cut myself a piece as well. But it's really amazing. And you're going to take the rest of this one home, Avi.
Okay, yes, for my family.
So your family, I know your son.
I assume the other half of this head is for the Soloveichiks.
I know your son. No, we have many other heads. So you don't need to worry about us. We have many other heads. I'll just cut myself a piece. If you give me a second. There we go. It's coming off. Fantastic.
You have to really be a butcher for this.
Yes. Okay.
All right.
Amen. Come on, tell me that's not amazing.
It was really good.
That's what I'm saying.
I highly recommend it.
So, it's really fantastic, and
it's definitely better than a fish head. I've had white fish.
But this is so good.
Definitely.
The kids love it, and it's really one of the highlights of our holiday. So that's also a pun. Mm-hmm. It's not as elastic a pun, but the use of sheep's heads also paralleled another interesting evolution of Rosh Hashanah, which was it became more and more focused on Akedat Yitzchak, of the binding of Isaac. And of course, a sheep's head is critical to the binding of Isaac, and perhaps the shofar itself, because it is the ram's horn, and therefore its head, that is entangled in the bush, which leads it to become the substitute for Isaac.
Right.
So, so one of the traditional prayers is that we be a head and not a tail, and then we add, and that you remember the story of the binding of Isaac in our merit. Now, we should just add, what does it mean to be a head and not a tail? I mean, on the face of it, it's just asking for Jewish independence and, again, safety from enemies, which is a common prayer. Right. It's basically this. But my grandfather, who was deeply interested in psychology, said there's something even more profound here, which is that the decisions we make emanate from the head. It is the head of the dog that wags the tail, not the tail that wags the dog. And the point is, on Rosh Hashanah, we can be passive, or we can be like the head. We can actually make decisions that will reverberate throughout our year. My grandfather said that actually Rosh Hashanah literally translated does not mean the new year, it means the head of the year. Because just as what begins in the head emanates throughout our body, so too, the decisions we make at the beginning of the year have the power to emanate throughout the year. And that parallels very beautifully what Rabbi Joseph Soloveichik famously said, or something like, a man is born an object and dies an object, but he has the ability to live like a subject. And the question is, are we going to be a tail or a head? Will we live actively rather than passively? And that could determine whether this is a year in which we come out ahead. So, you see what I mean?
You really sold me on the sheep's head. It's like huge amounts of symbolism.
This is what I'm telling you. It's huge.
But the last thing is what's actually common that a lot of us know how to eat, and that's honey. We have here actual honeycomb, not just honey in a jar. But that doesn't seem like a pun. What's the history of honey?
So again, do we want to leave it under here? Or we want to take it out?
We can take it out now.
There are two medieval signs that became very popular. One is based on the Talmud, that the Talmud doesn't mention it in the context of Rosh Hashanah, which is to eat pomegranates. Again, because it's seen in the Talmud as a sign of abundance. The Talmud says that Jews are filled with mitzvot, like the seeds of a pomegranate. So it also became a way of looking forward to a year of abundance both physically but also in mitzvot. And that became a very common medieval a common medieval sign, eaten on Rosh Hashanah, and then there is honey. as it developed, one dipped an apple in honey. That just seems to be a way of conveying the honey itself, and asking for a Shana Tova Umituka, a sweet year. Now, what's interesting about this is that people think that honey was a special Rosh Hashanah food and that's it. But the truth is actually, in the history of Ashkenaz, honey became the way of celebrating all special occasions. On Rosh Hashanah, what was eaten was not just honey, but honey cake, which in Yiddish was known as lekach, is known as lekach. And honey cake is eaten on Rosh Hashanah to this day, but it was originally eaten at every Ashkenazic celebration of a great moment. A brit, a wedding, an engagement party, any special occasion of Jewish joy. People ate cake eaten with honey. The most famous example is in the medieval period when a young boy was brought to school. He was given a cake with psukim made out of honey, ugash and ilusha bidvash, a cake kneaded with honey, and verses from the Torah were written on it. And the child would read the psukim, would read the verses, and then he would devour the cake. So honey is actually a way of marking and celebrating important moments. Rosh Hashanah, but all special moments in Ashkenaz. That's been lost as Ashkenazic Jewry has embraced sushi and single malt scotch. The honey cake is no longer at the center of Jewish celebrations. You could see a remnant of it if you go to a traditional Jewish wedding. You go to what's called the Chassan's Tish, right? That's where they celebrate with the Chatan, the groom. Before the wedding, there's usually a few sad pieces of honey cake sitting forlorn and forgotten while everyone gathers around like the little hot dogs. But the point is actually very profound, which is, if we actually think about what the symbolism of honey is, we have to ask ourselves, what do we know about honey? So we know a couple things. First, this honey, bee honey, does not appear that often in the Bible. When the land of Israel is called the land of milk and honey, that honey is date honey, not bee honey. Bee honey appears only really 2 times in the Bible, but they are both deeply resonant. They're both deeply resonant. The first one is that Jonathan, David's son, is with his troops at war, and King Saul has declared a fast, and they're basically dying of starvation. And he looks and he sees, not honey in a jar, but he sees this, honeycomb. He sees a beehive. And he extends his staff, and he licks the honey, and his eyes light up. Now we have to understand what that means, his eyes light up. Because honey has actually, I think, the most calories of any natural food, or one of the most. It has enormous energy. It's like the natural energy bars of the world. And so he has the slightest bit. Avi, I know of a teacher of mine was talking to somebody who needed to eat on Yom Kippur for medical reasons. And so they sought something that they could eat a tiny bit and it would give them the most calories possible. What do you think that was?
So if it's not a Red Bull, I assume it's honeycomb.
No, it was actually Haagen-Dazs ice cream. But in the natural world, it was. I think that's what they were, or some sort of ice cream. But in the natural world, it was honey. And what Yonatan says very beautifully, he says, "Ru'u ki oru einai ki ta'amti ma'at vashzeh." He says, "Look how my eyes have lit up just by eating the slightest bit of honey." That's one striking aspect of honey. It gives you extraordinary energy. Second is, because of its antibacterial properties, honey never spoils. They found edible honey in King Tut's tomb. So to eat honey and to mark special occasions with honey and to ponder its sweetness on Rosh Hashanah is to actually think about the following, I think. Which aspects of life are truly enduring, like honey, and which aspects of life, even the smallest amount, is truly sustaining and enlightening. And if Jews marked holidays, weddings, births of children, entry into the covenant, bar mitzvahs, and so forth, with honey, what's being said here is, these are the moments that are the true honey of our lives. Now, what's fascinating about that is that the only other time where bee honey appears in the Bible, and indeed, the other reference to honey, not in a plot line, but just as a reference, is Torah is compared to honey. Torah is called u'mitzupim midvash v'nofet sufim. sweeter than the drippings of honey on the honeycomb. So Torah is, of course, the ultimate honey because it is eternal, and even the slightest bit brings light to our lives. Now, the only other place in the Torah, in the Tanakh, where honey appears, is in the story of Samson, where Samson kills a lion, and then when he comes back, he sees that in the carcass of the lion, bees have built a hive, and he creates a riddle to describe the honey that he eats out of the hive, which is inside the dead lion. He reaches into it just because we haven't given you enough appetizing images. He reaches into the carcass of the dead lion and pulls out the honey and eats it. And he calls this in his riddle, from the devourer comes forth something sustaining, and from the fierce comes forth the sweet. But if you think about it, that's actually a great metaphor for Jewish history, because so many empires tried to devour us. But in the end, they fell on the ash heap of history. And we lived as a people because we built holy, humble hives of honey, meaning of Torah, of spirituality, of holiness, and of love, because we treasured what was truly enduring and savored what was truly sweet. And so, from the fierce came forth the sweet. Jewish history is very fierce, and yet we focused on the sweet. So I would suggest that to eat honey is not just to pray for a sweet year, but there's a deep moral message there. Is how do we make our year sweet? Truth is, it all depends on what we value. If we focus on what is truly enduring and truly sustaining, then our year will have a better chance of being a sweet one. And that's ultimately what honey's moral message is all about. And I would add, in as deep a theological point, that I actually prefer Granny Smith apple rather than red apples, because the tartness balances out the sweetness of the honey.
That's a good point.
I'm on a diet, so I reserve myself for important nutritional foods like sheep's head and locust. But if you'd like to eat the honey,
I'll give it a shot.
Absolutely.
Shana Tova
Shana Tova to you, my friend.
New Year.
So, and you could buy this in the honey, and you can actually go online, very cool, if you want to spend the money, you can buy the entire frame of honey from like a beehive. And I say that, well, now that you know what honey means, it will help you frame your priorities if we may combine puns and honey.
We're continuing the puns.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it's all about. Usually rabbis don't like puns, but, it's very unlike a rabbi, obviously. So
I'm joking.
So it maybe have some water. I don't have any puns for the water, but that's the... how is your honeycomb, by the way?
Apparently...
It went down the wrong way.
Apparently it's like, it's making me choke.
Yeah.
Which is not what I expected.
Yeah.
I expected that it would be the locusts that made me choke.
If it turns out that you were allergic to honey and then like something happens to you right here on the live stream, that would be really bad.
Well,
though famous and kind of epic.
Yes. Well, mindful of the time so that we can get to Q&A.
Yeah.
We should probably give the people what we want.
Yes.
What they want.
Yeah. We're going to eat a locust
some
together.
Of these locusts.
Let's do it.
This
is very low calories, by the way. So.
I have never had a locust before, so do I say a shehechianu
No, alas,
on this?
shehechianu is only for fruit. But there's actually, do you see the eyes? Could you show them the eyes?
Yeah.
You should show them so people can see. There's like little eyes at the end of it.
So you can really see, it's a whole locust here.
Yeah, it's a whole
eyes
locust.
And wings.
You ready for this, my friend?
Is this meat or parv?
It's parv.
It's parv.
I'm telling you. It's the best. It's the best food ever. It's protein. It's parv.
All right.
It's like the sushi of the insect world.
Do you eat it all in one bite,
yeah,
or
why not?
do you
Let's
do
just
like
do
half
it.
of it?
Let's do it.
Okay.
Let's do it. It was good.
Honestly, it's kind of like a potato chip.
Yeah.
Like a meaty potato chip.
If it had a dip.
We could dip it in the honey.
No, I think we need something savory.
So, and where can people get these?
As I mentioned, these can be purchased from the Biblical Museum of Jewish History.
All right.
100% whole dried kosher locust. Species, Locusta migratoria.
Okay. Well, Rabbi Soloveichik, for teaching us about the Jewish theology of food, for helping us prepare for the new year and giving us some ideas for our Rosh Hashanah meals, and personally for introducing me to the taste of dried locusts and sheep's head. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Avi, and I hope you'll take the rest of the sheep's head home to share with your family, and I hope it'll be okay if I'll take the locust home.
All yours. All yours.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone, for joining
Shana
us,
Tova.
and Shana Tova.